Hey, you guys, how's it going? My name is Sarah Lacko, and I've always been fascinated about people's stories and their hardships and how they've overcome those hardships and struggle and coming out on the other side, sometimes turning their pain into their power and sometimes even their passion. We get to talk to the true underdogs, which I'm very much obsessed with, and we get to pick their brains and learn from them and grow with them. So we also, I keep forgetting, we have a sponsor today. I almost forgot, even though I just told our lovely guest today that I was going to say this, and then I'm like a squirrel, like super squirrely. I forget things. So anyways, moving along, our sponsor is the Badass Backpacking Babes, which comes available April 4th, which has already happened by the time of this show, which is today. And it is both an online course and retreat. We're offering the online course teaching women how to backpack and embrace their wild and learn and grow and become empowered through nature. And so we get to learn everything about how to immerse yourself into nature and backpacking. So I'm super excited about it. Link for that will be below in the description of the show. So anyways, to our guests, I'm very excited. And by the way, before I introduce our guests, I'm super excited about this being cut off right here. My mom got me this thrifting shirt. She's a thrifting mama, as I am myself as well. But she also likes it for the girls, you know, to look good. And so, but this shirt, the button, I feel like they could pop out. So if it does, you're not going to see it because it's cut off like right there. So you're welcome. Anyways, to our guests. What is your name and what do you do? Oh, I can't hear you.
Did you? Just kidding. I was muted. That just shows how awkward I'll be for the rest of the show. So
Okay, I just talked about my boobs, so we're good.
Hey, it's great. My name's Laura Hunter, and I am the owner of Pure Impressions Design, where I sell my handmade jewelry.
Yay! Which her stuff is super awesome, and we're gonna also be including that link to her very beautiful jewelry on the description as well. So Laura, I'm super excited to have you here.
Thanks.
We have followed each other for quite some time, and then recently got to chat it up briefly because someone had referred you for me to interview you for this show because you have a very inspirational story. And so when we talked, I was like, wow, that is super inspirational. So I'm super excited to like dive in today and get to learn more about you. Great. So do tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what was childhood? What did that look like for you, childhood?
Childhood, there was a lot of bad and probably a little bit of good, but the little bit of good I just remember bits and pieces of. I have two siblings, and my brother is 5 years older than me, and my sister is about 15 years older than me. And when she was 18 and I was probably about 3, she got married and moved away. And that left me and my brother alone in a house with 2 functioning alcoholic adults. There were a lot of things that I think that were shielded from us when we were kids from her because she was pretty much a live-in babysitter. So she cared for us a lot and she loved us. And when she left, we lost that a lot. There was always a lot of fighting and a lot of abuse. My parents worked full time, and then when they would come home from work, they would go straight to the bar and then come home whenever they wanted to. So they made sure that we were mostly fed and we were clothed, but we didn't get a lot of love or affection from them. And that kind of left us in a pretty bad situation as kids, I feel like.
Not a lot of guidance, it sounds like, either. Like they gave you your basics, but not like...
Yeah, no guidance. And then I think, you don't leave kids with a lot of guidance and they end up getting in trouble. And back then I thought that was our fault. I just thought we were bad kids. But looking back on it, I don't really know how kids can do good if they don't know what to do. So growing up, going through school, we were always in trouble, always hanging around with the wrong crowd and messing out with kids we shouldn't have definitely been with. And we didn't have school choice in Utah like we did here. And the junior high that we ended up going to was a pretty dangerous place. Like there were cars that were being flipped over in the parking lot and lit on fire from the teachers. And we had metal detectors and um, shootings, and I was shoved inside lockers daily and just kind of just got beat up every single day. So
So
yeah,
it sounds like it was traumatic at home, but it was also like traumatic at school, like as
yeah,
far as
absolutely,
having like a safe haven, not really
absolutely.
having that.
So I guess one day I just thought I would take matters into my own hand, and I took a kitchen knife to school. And I have no idea how I thought as a kid I was going to get that past the metal detectors, but clearly I did not. So I got kicked out of school, and my mom just told my sister, called her and said, "You either come pick her up, or I'm sending her to juvenile detention. I've had enough. I can't take care of her anymore." So luckily she did that, and I got to go live in a small little country town with my sister and her family and have a different life for a few years.
And how come did you bring that knife to school?
Just constantly being beaten up. I think that particular day, somebody had told me they were gonna meet me in the parking lot, and that was gonna be it. So oh
Well, and that survival too, like you said, like you knew there was metal detectors and you don't know why you really brought that, but sometimes when we are like so desperate, and especially as like a child, like sometimes you're just surviving things, and the things that you've done to survive, like we look back at it now and like, oh man, but it's like you're in that state of survival, and that's all you can think of is just to survive
yeah,
those struggles and those traumatic situations. And so I think it totally makes sense, why you ended up doing that. I mean, we can look back at it now and say like, well, yeah, such and such, but when you're in it, you're a child, and I mean, you're just surviving through things.
absolutely.
So how old were you when you went to go live with your sister?
I think I was in seventh or eighth grade. I was right before I like turned into an actual teenager, and I think in some pretty formative years there.
Well, and that's a long time too, to like eighth grade, you have like four, whatever, I'm terrible in math.
Some years, like some.
Freezing up. But I mean, you didn't have like too much more to go to be an adult, I mean, you still had a decent amount of years to go, but you had to survive for quite some time in that other environment before going with your sister. And then what was it like with being with your sister? How was that different?
Was completely different. You go from having zero rules and zero curfew and zero supervision to living with a family that actually cares about you now, which, I mean, looking back on that was a great thing. And I'm so, so thankful for my sister and her family for taking me in. But it was hard. Like all of a sudden I had a curfew, and there were things that I had chores, and, but it was also nice too, because we had family events, and I went to family reunions, and we got to sit down and eat dinner every single night, which was something that like I had no idea families did together. So that was nice.
That's very cool. Well, and two, also like as a kid, when you have been taking care of yourself for such a long time, and then this person steps in and they're like, you do this and you do that, and you're like, listen, I've been taking care of myself for this long. I'm
I
sure
don't
there was
need
a little
you.
bit, right? But you're like, actually, I
Right.
do.
Yeah.
Like your inner inside voice is saying like, take care of me, give me rules, especially as kids. I think you're
Yeah.
right. Like we totally, as children, survive and I'm sorry, thrive when we do give our kids some rules, that we do give them some flexibility, but they also like know that we're there for them, and having that stability and having
Yeah.
rules, and what you're going to stand for, and what you're not. So I'm sure
Yeah.
that
I
was
agree.
a big change, but a really needed one. Of course, you didn't know that at first,
Right.
but
No idea.
that's how
I
that
do
works,
call my
isn't it?
sister all the time now, and I'm like, I'm so sorry for what I did when I was 14, or thank you so much for not giving up on me. Like, there are so many times where I still have those conversations with her now, so it's kind of funny.
And what does she say?
You're welcome. I love you. She's the kindest human being that ever could exist. So,
Oh, that's very cool that you had her then. So tell me about like your lowest point where were you like in your lowest point in your life where you're like, things need to change? What did that look like for you?
So after I graduated high school, I moved back to Salt Lake with my best friend, and we were both working, and we were having what we thought was the time of our lives. We I met this guy who I thought was super awesome at the time, and sometime into the relationship, I realized that he was a drug dealer. So I started doing drugs and ended up addicted to meth. And there's a lot of that time during that time that I just really don't remember. I know that I probably wasn't a very good person during that time, and I know that there were just a lot of things that weren't good. I remember walking into the bathroom at my boyfriend's house and seeing this guy that we knew was dead. He had shot himself in the head, and that was kind of a pretty profound moment where I just decided, like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I have to figure this out. So I moved back in with my parents. And at the time, I didn't really have a lot of people that I was close with that knew what was going on. My mom ended up being, ironically, the only person that knew what had happened. And she did a lot to help me work through that. I think that being able to see them as adults and watching them so young, like, I was also struggling with addiction at the time, and realizing that that's what they were struggling with too. I think that it gave us this common thing that we could stand together with. So it was an interesting time to get to know them and see them as people, I guess.
Well, and also like being able to relate in that way and knowing it wasn't necessarily you, like your fault with why they
Right.
weren't around, but that addiction. And so you were maybe kind of able to see like firsthand, realizing it wasn't you as that child, it was them and that addiction.
Yeah, absolutely. I met my ex-husband during that time, and thought he was a super cool guy. Clearly, going back, I didn't have very good taste in men, but um, we had our daughter together. I realized he wasn't so nice. But my parents, even then, did so much to support me when I was pregnant with her and afterwards. And um, my dad had kind of been in a pretty bad accident, probably a little bit before that time, where he was run over by a diesel, and it bent him in half frontwards and broke all of his ribs and punctured his lungs, and he was pretty sick. And I think we were kind of not waiting on him to die, but we all just were like, we knew something wasn't going to be good going forward. My mom had quit her job and was taking care of him all day, and um, her and my dad pretty much took care of Brianna, my daughter. They would make her pancakes every morning and made her into this fat little baby. And I think just having them as that support system, then I think it really helped me um, with a lot of things during that time.
And
So,
how old were you when you had your daughter?
21.
So pretty young.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We are at 21, we're like, oh, we're not that little. And then we're now, and we're like, damn, 21 was young.
I have a 21-year-old, and I can't even imagine. Yeah.
Right? True story. Well, and two, like, was it helpful for you to see your parents be like, they had struggled to be there for you growing up? Was it helpful for you to see them be there for your daughter and you in a way as well?
Oh, absolutely. Um, my brother will see this and he'll probably be upset, but I think that's one of the biggest things with why I'm able to forgive them a little more, and maybe he wasn't, is because I got to see them be the grandparents that they weren't to us as parents. And I don't think that my other siblings got to see that like I did.
And that makes a lot of sense. It's almost like you can't take back for what had happened, but there was maybe a little sense of like redemption with them being able to not be that for you and your siblings, but to be that for your child. And as mothers, as parents, our children are everything.
Yeah, I agree.
So then at what point with like that lower point for you, where were you like, okay, things have to change for me? Where was that shift in that path that you were going?
I think that was right then. Like I was doing a lot of soul searching, and I had kind of just given up on men, and it ended up being a shorter process than I thought it was going to be, because I think as soon as you decide you're going to focus on you is when sometimes your soulmate or Mr. Right or whatever shows up. And that's pretty much what happened. Is my now husband Ben, I met him right around that time, and we were dating for quite a while, and I had found out that I was pregnant, and he was going to come with me to talk to my parents about it. And we were actually pretty excited. And the week before, I might lose it a little here, but the week before we were supposed to tell them, my mom actually passed away. So, and we had no idea anything was even wrong with her. We were all, like I said, we were kind of expecting my dad to maybe go, but not my mom. So that was a pretty shocking and traumatic experience at that point.
Had she been sick during that point and not said anything to you guys, or?
I think that she knew that she was sick. Like looking back, there were some conversations that we had, but she had high blood pressure, and her doctor, I guess, just kept prescribing her medicine and wasn't making her come in to do her checkups. So she ended up having an aneurysm of the aorta. And not long after that, my dad passed away too. I think he just kind of gave up. So I think losing your parents that hard is just, it's gut wrenching at the time. And then looking back now, there's so much where I think it would have been so nice to have them there as a young adult, or even now.
Absolutely. And to, you know, having like another child and having it with someone that you love, and being able to share that again with your parents, I'm sure I could totally see why you were looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And so then you got to, but you get to tell your dad about it?
Yep, my dad, and he was so excited, and he got to spend a little bit of time with our son before he passed away, and I think that was important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then what did life look like after that for you? Like, you know, grieving your parents and
I actually didn't grieve them for the longest time. I ended up in therapy probably 5 years later because of it, where they were like, well, you're grieving. I'm like, oh, I'm not grieving. I already grieved. They're like, no, you didn't. So you're going to deal with that now.
what did that non-grief look like for you? Because it can show up in like anger, it can show up in controlling.
I think it absolutely wasn't anger. I think that there were just a lot of times I would end up in an argument with my husband, and neither one of us would knew what had even happened. And I think that that's what it was coming out as. And finally, I just said, I went to therapy to figure out why I was so angry at everything. And that's exactly what they said, is you're grieving your parents. I thought the lady was crazy. I actually didn't go back to her for 3 weeks after the appointment where she told me that. I just told her she was crazy, and I left. And 3 weeks later, I went back, and I was like, okay, fine, you're right. So,
I believe you. I thought about it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing about grief, is like there are different stages to grief, and we can get stuck in a stage of it. And I think anger would most likely be the one you get stuck in, because anger, like it's a false sense of control. Like it's you saying like, oh yeah, I have control of things. I'm just going to hold everything tight, and I'm going to take control. And anger in that grief stage really gives you this false sense of control.
Yeah.
Where really you don't.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so that was about 5 years that you were in that?
I think so. Our brains don't really, I think they forget things on purpose for it. But yeah, I think it was about 5 years. And we were living here by then. We had moved to Wyoming, and yeah, I think it was about 5 years.
Well, and we talked earlier, it wasn't being recorded, but we had this conversation of when going through traumas, we forget things and there are things that we don't recall. Even, it can even be good memories.
Oh
So
yeah.
your brain just kind of like to help you in the most beautiful of ways is like it gives you this amnesia. And so you don't always like remember all the facts or remember exactly how it happened. I remember just recently my mom reminded me of like one of my traumas and she's like, "Oh, do you remember when, such and such happened?" And I was like, "Actually, I completely forgot, but now I'm
Yeah.
remembering." So,
Yeah, it's
no,
interesting.
yeah, it's interesting what you're right, it is interesting what you kind of like you block out. It's just a way to help as far as like survival and
Yeah.
continuing through, not being stuck in it. Um, so you on the up and up, so you started to deal with your trauma, right? You started to deal with the death of your parents. Did you also like work through your childhood trauma in counseling and just all the things, or mostly?
There was a lot of that. I think a lot of it we just focused on maybe like dealing with relationships now, because when you're going through that as a kid, you don't learn how to handle emotions, you don't learn how to have conversations. I know there's still things that I could use help with today with that, obviously, but I think most of it was focused on the grieving part.
And then from that healing and from going through your grieving, how did things start to look up for you? How did things start to change?
I think I just realized I didn't really want my kids to have the same life that I had had, and that if I didn't become a better person then they were. I mean, um, watching my parents slip in and out of alcoholism so easily, and knowing that I had that addictive personality myself. It's something that I always have to watch within myself, but I just didn't want them to have that same life. I didn't want them growing up in poverty or having the same kind of home life that we had. And so that's just pretty much what my husband and I agreed that we would focus on, was making sure our kids had a better life than what we did.
Sometimes those having children, it really makes you reflect on like what you want for them and how like we as parents need to be better for ourselves, like to be better for our children. And a lot of times they are our deeper why on why we want to show up for ourselves. Sometimes it's really, really difficult to do that just for ourselves.
Yeah.
But when we have this other being or these other human beings that we're responsible for, and for them to, go out in the world one day and do these really incredible things, it ends up being that bigger why. But then did you notice that once you started to do things better for them, that you started to do better for yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that it's a good starting point, but I think that you start realizing the difference that makes. And I think honestly, even with as much personal growth that I've done, has been more in the past 5 years than any time in my life. Yeah, I would say that more recently is where I've worked on a lot of that myself.
Well, and I think too, like there are different stages for us. There's like different levels. And so like what you don't know, right? So when you're younger and you're realizing you like come to this like growth spot and then you're like, okay, now I'm here, do I want to stay within this or do I want to rise above it and figure out how to get higher and level up? And then we come to another level and they're like, okay, we've gotten here, now what? So a lot of times like you say, within the past 5 years you've had a tremendous amount of growth. It really shows that you have just continued to like level up in your life. And that's a amazing thing, because we talk about on this show like growth is so important. And so growth is just a continuous thing. I always talk about, it's my favorite quote, if you're not growing, you're dying. It's always like really resided with me, because just being stagnant, you really aren't going anywhere, and it can actually be super dangerous, like those comfort zones. And I mean, it looks different for all of us, but I love that these last 5 years have been tremendous for you in growth, because that just means you've been like growing throughout your life, and now you're just taking it to that next level.
Well, thanks.
It's very cool. Well, and I was going to ask you, one of my questions is why, like, what was your reason why not to fall deeper, back into things? But, you talked about that your children are that. So from your children, like rising above your hardships, and your struggles for your kids, what like successes have you had and accomplished, from your past, from your pain, from your struggles? What has that like fueled you and propelled you for your successes?
I think that I started my own business. It's probably been about 10 years, and it kind of happened as an accident. So it wasn't really like I was like, well, now I'm going to start my own business, and then there was that, but it just happened by accident. I was just on Etsy one day and realizing that all these people were selling all these amazing handmade things, and I called Ben and I said, I'm going to sell my jewelry. And he said, do you know how to do that? And I said, no, it can't be that hard. But spoiler alert, it is that hard. It is so hard. But over the last 10 years, we've grown it to be this amazing 6-figure business, which is, I think, has been probably the best thing for my self-confidence and my self-esteem, is just being able to do something like that.
And I just recently interviewed someone else, and I talked about, like, with having your own business, it really forces you to grow.
You don't have a choice.
You really don't have a choice. Like, you have to grow. You have to work on your confidence, because if you don't have confidence, like, you don't have a business if you're not working on that. Like, in the beginning, you're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to make jewelry and I'm going to sell it. And it's like, well, you need to market it. You need to show it. You need to talk about it. And you need to put it out there. And that's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes people without a business, is they, a lot of people that go to like that 9-to-5 job, right? You go, you clock in, you work, you leave. And with a business, it's like, it's always there. And it's a part of something that you're growing, and it's kind of like a part of you.
Yeah,
and so, yeah, there's a lot to work through with it. And so, but kudos to you, 6 figures. Go it, girl. That's awesome.
Thanks.
That's awesome. So we're coming up on our wrap up question. So I would love to know, like, based on your hardships and your successes, how do you think we can do better as individuals, do better as a community or society? How do you think we can do better?
I think we can do better in all of those areas. I think as individuals, we just do better than our parents did. I think as long as we are striving to be better than our parents were, even if we had the best parents, even if you had the best parents, there's still something that they did that wasn't perfect, because we're all human. And I think the biggest thing that we all should remember about our parents is that they were just kids. Like, they were growing up as we were growing up, and they were going through everything that they went through on their own, and raising kids. It's a hard thing to remember, but I also think as a community and a society, I think we can do better in trying to make sure that we're supporting families that clearly need that help. I think there was a family that lived next door to us when we were growing up, when my parents were always at the bar and my brother was working or at school, that took care of me. I mean, I don't know if they realize how big of an effect they made on my life, but they fed me when my parents weren't home. They made sure that I had a warm place to go if the house was locked. And they just took care of me. And I think that's a society thing that we need more of.
That is so true and so beautiful. like our parents, like we do the best that we know how to do. And like parents, it goes the same thing. Like sometimes we look at parents and we're like, oh, they should have it all together. They should know, they should. But it's like you only know what you know and you don't know what you don't. And so
Right.
you do the best that you can with what you have. And sometimes it's not a lot, right? And so I love your answer to this question because it is true. Like regardless of what parents you've had and what that looked like, we can always do better and we can always grow from it and learn from it. So I love your advice. And also just to like lend a helping hand and help families. And that's, I remember I my kiddo had some friends and they were super little at the time, and they would come over and they were always really hungry, and their parents didn't seem to be very present all the time. And it might have been because they were both working, or I don't know the circumstances, to be
Right.
honest, so I'm not going to pretend I do. But I just remember these kids coming over and I would buy extra food for them and like give them food and whatever. So even just hearing something like that, like on the other side of it, is just really beautiful. That even just doing something really small, like you said, that they kind of change things for you, even doing something really small, which is really big when it's for that person. So that's a really
Absolutely.
beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing that. I like that.
Yeah.
So I would very much want to thank you for being on this show. It's been really cool listening to your story. I know that sometimes, well, all the time, our stories are super personal and they can be really hard to share. And there can be different things attached with that, whether it's like being embarrassed or shame. I know at some point I'm going to be sharing my story, and I've had to really like work through some of my stuff. And so just doing it, like sharing that, is such a personal thing. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. It means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And please tell us, like, how can people connect with you? Where can they find you and see this very cool jewelry business?
Everything is under Pure Impressions or Pure Impressions Design.
Cool.
So pretty easy.
Instagram, Facebook.
Yep.
Okay, cool. And we'll also have those links to both her website and her Instagram and Facebook names in the description as well. But Laura, thank you so much for being here today. And we're just going to keep on learning people's stories and growing together. So thanks so much for being on here again. And we'll talk to you guys later. So much love and good vibes, and we'll see you later. Bye, you guys.
Thanks. Bye.